Good morning. Welcome to the Kingsport News Hour for the 25th day in the 12th month, 16th year of Changi, as we're getting down there in the countdown. Almost finished with the 16th year. It's been quite an eventful year, hasn't it? Anyway, we will start the 17th year of Changi, of course, on Tuesday, Tuesday next week. All right. Of course, one of the things that happened this year, of course, was the incarceration of Hak Jahan. She was actually released about, what is it now, 11 hours ago, temporarily. In other words, she wasn't released. Her incarceration was temporarily suspended. And this was done, the court says, so that she could receive a treatment on her heart. Apparently there's something wrong with her heart. And I think last November, wasn't it? She was released for a similar situation. And anyway, but her movements are severely restricted. She can only go to a hospital, and I think it's some sort of university hospital where she is, and not she can't just meet anyone there. She can only meet her lawyers and people who are providing her food and people who are involved in moving her and things like that. So the court has actually specified who she is able to have contact with, and so it's kind of a soft incarceration, I suppose. It's kind of a house arrest, or not a house arrest, but a hospital arrest, I guess you could say. Anyway, it's from today until the 21st, so all of the remainder of this week and then all of next week. And I think, although they don't say it, I think it's pretty clear to me that they did this because the Lunar New Year is coming up, and it's a big holiday. It's kind of like, Christmas and New Year, Christmas and Thanksgiving combined in the United States. And, nobody would want to spend that holiday in jail. So even though it's a very severely restricted release, I think they kind of trying to be nice to her on this Lunar New Year holiday, giving her a kind of a holiday, I suppose. Anyway, next week, Saturday, she'll be going back into her jail cell, and we continue to hope and pray that she can understand that she is in jail because of Father's love, that he is giving her an opportunity and an environment in which she can repent, an environment where repentance is easier, I guess you could say, an environment where she can reflect on herself and what she has done over the past 13 and a half years, 13 years and 10 months, and realize that she made a wrong turn, and that it's in her own interest to come to Jesus, as it were. Yes, okay, but come, come to True Father, return to True Father. Anyway, I continue to hope and pray that she will repent. Certainly, I think it is important, very important, that she repents before she goes to spirit world. Okay. All right, so I know one of the commenters on a recent King's Report expressed a very different view, basically parroting the Family Federation propaganda. I read it, and I gave a little. I hope people can learn to think for themselves. It's important. All right, let's take our sojourn around the country and see what's going on. Right now, 29 degrees at Chongpyeong, Tennessee. Clear skies, variable cloudiness today, high of 48. Okay, that passes for a nice spring temperature, a nice spring day. Tonight, partly cloudy, low of 26. Father's hometown in Cheongju in North Pyongan Province, Korea, mostly clear at 33. Increasing cloudiness tonight, a low of 23. Tomorrow, sun and areas of low clouds in the morning, followed by hazy sun, high of 49. And at the Cheonryung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, It is currently clear and 27. Breezy with considerable cloudiness today, high of 33. Tonight, partly cloudy and colder, low of 10 degrees. Yes, Northeast Pennsylvania still hanging on to winter. And at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, clear and 46. Warmer with times of clouds and sun today, high of 79. That's nice. Tonight, partly cloudy, a low of 58. And at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, clear and 37. Continued clear tonight, low of 26. Tomorrow, times of clouds and sun, high of 59. And then at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, clear and 38. Clear tonight, low of 30. And tomorrow, sunny to partly cloudy, high of 56. Guangzhou, Guangdong Province in China, 70 degrees night. Tomorrow, pleasantly warm with some clouds, then sunshine, high of 79. And by the way, it's time that we start thinking about daylight saving time. All right. Yes. Let's see. Anyway, I think it may be the first Sunday in March. Anyway, we'll check that as we go along, but it's coming, just to let you know, it's coming. And so we're going to have for people in the United States, no change. Your clocks change automatically. People outside the United States, there will be a change in many cases, and you'll have to stay tuned for that. All right, so let's go to Father's Word, sin and restoration through indemnity. Well, we haven't been in this book for a long time. Okay, January 7th, 1990. So Father is here in this first sentence. He's going to define change of blood lineage, 혈통전환이라는 원통한 비운의 운명을 지닌 타락의 후손이 된 것이 기가 막히게 비통한 사실입니다. So it is incredibly tragic that human beings, there's no subject to this sentence, but human beings, that human beings became the descendants of the fall, carrying the tragic fate of change of blood lineage. 이걸 벗어나기 위해서는 안간 힘을 다해서 해방된 아들의 모습, 딸의 모습으로 나타나야 되고, so in order to cast this curse or this sadness off, human beings have to 안간 힘을 다해서, to use all their effort to appear or rise up or appear as a liberated son and liberated daughter. 되고, 그리고 하나님 대해서 서슴지 않고 아버지라고 할 수 있어야 됩니다. And then be able to refer to God as Father without any hesitation. Whoops. That's what the Father says. Yes. To be able to refer to God as 아버지, as 아버지, without hesitation. So who's hesitating these days? Huh? Who's hesitating? So are they going to be able to? Yeah. Wow, yeah. Hak Ja-han has really put them in a pickle, hasn't she? 자신 있어요? Are you confident? 선생님은 하나님 대해서 아버지하고 부를 자신 있겠나요? 없겠나요? 자신 있습니다. Do you think that Father is confident to refer to God as Father? I am confident, he says. I am confident. As Father, yes. Boy, it's clear. I mean, it's clear. And yet, the Family Federation leadership has spewed so much propaganda and really exploited the trust that people had in them to, just take them way off into a tangent, and it's really tragic. This one person, for example, who commented on the video where he was trying to make the case that I was completely wrong about Hak Ja-han, truly tragic and sad to read. I mean, the comment was like, well, like this was like this long. Okay, that's a lot. Question: who's going to read all that? But they don't care. They don't care that nobody reads it. They just want to. They just gotta. Yeah, with each stroke, uh, they're really shooting bullets my way. With each stroke of the keyboard. Well, anger is good. Anger is good. Yes, at least you know, uh, it means that someone is still alive. So I hope that this person can come to his senses. Perhaps someday he will. All right, so let's take a look at what is going on. So yeah, there's speaking of anger and speaking of things going on. So this morning, actually, right now in Asia, of course, it's a Thursday evening. And so, but this morning there was a lot of activity around the island of Taiwan. And this was activity, of course, done by the People's Republic of China, Communist China. And so let's see what's going on here. Let me get rid of that band there for you. Okay. Oh, didn't go away. Let's try again. There we go. Taiwan on high alert after 14 Chinese aircraft and vessels enter territory as tensions soar. Soar. Bring this up for you. So keep in mind that this happened just hours ago. The Taiwanese Ministry of National Defense is on high alert after 14 Chinese aircraft and vessels entered its air defense identification zone early Thursday morning. The MND wrote in a post on its official X page that 17 People's Liberation Army aircraft and 7 People's Liberation Army Navy vessels, as well as one other official ship, were detected operating near the Taiwanese ADIZ until around 6 a.m. local time. That would be about 6 p.m. the previous day in New York. Of the aircraft and vessels, 14 crossed the median line and entered Taiwan's northern, southwestern, and southeastern ADIZ, the post said. We have monitored the situation and responded, the MND added. In a printout statement attached to the tweet, which included a few additional details about the situation, the MND wrote, ROC armed forces have monitored the situation and employed CAP aircraft, Navy ships, and coastal missile systems in response to detected activities. And here's a map of what was going on. So in 2 locations here, and here. So the red, so this is not officially territorial water, but it is the air defense identification zone. And here says PLA activities in the vicinity of Taiwan on February 11th. February 11th, that would be yesterday, but I thought this was written today. It said Thursday, didn't it? It said early Thursday morning. Okay. Oh, I see. From the 11th to the 12th. Okay, so from 6 o'clock on the 11th to 6 o'clock on the 12th. And 115, they have their own way of counting years, just like we count about Chungi 16. They have since this counts the years since Sun Yat-sen overthrew the Qing dynasty and established the Republic of China. So it's 115 years there. This is year 115. Okay. Well, here it is in English as well. Okay. So anyway, here, number 1, 5 sorties of fighters crossed the median line, and also 2 sorties crossed the median line. Median line is the line between the 2 sides, this is Communist China over here and Republic of China, Taiwan over here. And then also here, number 2, you had 12 sorties of fighters and a bomber, support aircraft and helicopter coming in like that. So when ships or aircraft enter this zone, they're supposed to identify themselves and receive permission to be there. But of course, they did not do that. Okay. The second page shows a map that details where the aircraft entered Taiwanese airspace and where other vessels entered its waters. And okay, so there's some ambiguity there. And so, meanwhile, a Chinese official in Beijing condemned the accord. The agreement, the detection of Chinese sorties and in the Taiwanese ADIZ comes just under a month after Taiwan's premier hailed a new trade deal with the United States as the best tariff deal enjoyed by countries with trade surpluses with Washington. But a Chinese official in Beijing condemned that trade deal. And this agreement cut the U.S. tariffs to Taiwanese goods to 15% in exchange for $250 billion in new investments in the U.S. tech industry. All right. So here, okay. All right. So anyway, that happened to this morning. Now, meanwhile, no, I want to do this one first. Okay, so top Chinese official issues ominous threat to Taiwan separatists in significant speech. So Taiwan separatist, of course, meaning anyone who is advocating independence for Taiwan or even advocating the status quo is considered by Beijing to be a separatist and bad. Okay, so this is okay. All right, so a top Chinese official warned that it plans to support any patriotic pro-unification forces in Taiwan and that it will strike separatists aiming at independence for the island. So yeah, they're going to patriotic pro-reunification forces, meaning anyone in Taiwan that wants to just, say, okay, well, let's go ahead and be a part of communist China. I mean, the motherland. Let's go ahead and be a part of the motherland. I mean, it'll all work out. It's worked out for Hong Kong, right? No, they really can't write to Hong Kong. But anyway, during an address to this year's Taiwan Work Conference, a senior Chinese Communist Party leader, Wang Huning, said that China must make efforts to promote the peaceful development of cross-strait relations and advance national reunification. And this statement reflects, of course, sort of a plan A, you might say, and that is to take over Taiwan without firing a shot by infiltrating various aspects of Taiwan society. And frankly, Beijing has done a very good job of that. The CCP has done a very good job. Just recently, one of the senior leaders of the Kuomintang, the main opposition party, visited Beijing, and sat down with senior leaders of the CCP, and had a very friendly discussion. And talked about how the two sides can have better relations, and this is the main opposition, which actually has a majority of seats in the legislature in Taiwan. So we can see that God has his work cut out for him there in Taiwan. Misguided people, I would say, who think that they can unite with China and that everything is going to be okay. No, they will be the first ones to be purged. It always works that way. I can just go through the history of not just the communist, but Union, and you always can see that it's these moderates who are used until they're no longer useful, and then they are purged with a bullet in the back of the head. According to a summary by news agency Xinhua, Wang said Beijing must firmly support the patriotic pro-unification forces on the island, resolutely strike against Taiwan independent separatist forces, oppose interference by external forces, looking at you, America, and safeguard peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and Japan too, by the way, and Europe too. Wang is the fourth highest ranking CCP leader and is in charge of Beijing's policy towards Taiwan, which China sees as part of its territory. And last week, Chinese President Xi Jinping called for mutual respect and warned against any interference over Taiwan during a phone call with President Donald Trump. The relationship has been rocky over recent months, primarily due to the U.S. support of Taiwan and Taipei and a number of major arms sales. The call came after years of mounting pressure from Beijing. Okay, so now we're switching to the telephone call, which we have already talked about last week or earlier this week, I guess. Okay. All right, so that's what they're doing there. And let's see, let's take a look at this. Yeah, let's take a look at this one. Now, this is a story. Actually, the content of the story does not match the headline. And I think I came across this on Tuesday, and the headline looked interesting, and so I said, okay, we'll cover it on Thursday. Well, it's Thursday, so I have to fulfill my promise. But the interesting thing, though, is that this guy is paid by UPI, and he is of course, UPI, of course, being in Preston's camp. He is UPI's Arnaud de Bourggrave Distinguished Columnist. So, oh my goodness, they named something after de Bourggrave. Okay, anyway. Father, yeah, well, he had good feelings for de Bourggrave, that's true. Okay. A senior advisor at the Atlantic Council. Okay, so he is UPI's distinguished columnist, and he's a senior advisor at the Atlantic Council, which of course is very globalist. And he's also chairman of 2 private companies and the principal author of the Doctrine of Shock and Awe. Okay. Right. So anyway, Harlan Ullman, let's take a look at what he says. And I'm going to disagree with most of what he says. Okay. Former President Harry Truman to President Trump's second administration, the White House too often exaggerates or ignores the real degrees of danger posed by perceived major threats of the time. So he's going to argue that China is not the big bad monster that people make China out to be. All right. But of course, he's wrong. He's wrong. Just for one thing, anyone who understands communism is going to understand that China is a major ideological threat, and it needs to be taken down by the United States, the Chinese Communist Party, right? China is great, but the Chinese Communist Party needs to be taken down. So anyway, he says, let's take a look at his argument and destroy it as we go along. The former Soviet Union was a textbook case. After World War II, in which the Soviet Union had been critical to destroying Hitler and the Nazi war machine, benign views of it persisted until the Iron Curtain descended from the Baltic to the Adriatic. Lyndon Johnson was determined to fight communism on the Mekong and not the Mississippi. He fed into the myth of a monolithic communist threat, even when in fact China and Russia were at each other's throats. So now, the Vietnam War was fought because America failed to finish the job in Korea, and it's a war that America should have won, could have won, and would have won if the American people had received the proper education. Same with Korea. The reason that first Truman and then Eisenhower decided to sort of bring the Korean War to a close was that the American people simply were not supporting it, and they did not understand the scourge of communism and the fact that communism denies not only Christianity but religion in general, and so therefore has its own views of human rights and treats human beings as if they were no more valuable than dogs or cats, and can be killed at the whim of the leader. And uh, just because communist Vietnam has become a major tourist destination today does not change the fact that it is a communist country and it is governed by evil people. And MacArthur was right, and this is why Father loved MacArthur, and he wanted to make a movie about Incheon and about MacArthur. Um, so anyway, but now Lyndon Johnson, of course, was the U.S. president from the assassination of Kennedy until 1969, when he stepped down and gave the presidency to Richard Nixon. So he was president during most of the 1960s, and so he was primarily responsible for the Vietnam War. And as a Democrat, he did not understand what was going on there, and unfortunately, he did not have the opportunity to perhaps receive an education about communism. Reagan administration mounted a military buildup against the Soviet evil empire. Shortly after Reagan left office, the Soviet Union imploded. So he seems to be implying that the Reagan administration military buildup was unnecessary because Soviet Union was going to implode anyway on its own. And of course, this is also false. It was because of the military buildup that the Soviet Union just economically could not keep up, and so it imploded as a result of the Reagan administration's military buildup. So again, he's sort of saying that this whole thing about communism and everything is just exaggerated. From Barack Obama's presidency until Trump's second term, China was the pacing threat. And Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago this month has resurrected the Russian Federation as a smaller reincarnation of the old USSR, but consider the possibility of a failure to understand the actual threat. So he's saying that he's going to say that Russia is not the kind of threat that we think it is, or that people in Europe think it is, and also that China is not the threat that people think it is. So here he says, suppose China and Russia are in or are about to enter into a period of substantial decline. In the case of China, that would appear to be a metaphorical bridge that's miles too far. Right? So he says, yeah, fat chance. No, China is not going to decline. China's economy is among the world's largest. Well, they say it is pretty big. But listen, China's economy is in big trouble right now. Just saying that it's the biggest, it's still teetering, and they're in pretty desperate situation right now. Its military challenges that of the U.S., and with its Belt and Road Initiative, wolf warrior diplomacy, and growing overseas presence, it in some ways is more ubiquitous than America, right? So don't wait for China to collapse, because it's big. It's great. Russia, however, is in far worse shape. Its economy has been battered by war with more than 1 million casualties, if estimates are correct. In 1917 and 1989, after Russia withdrew from World War I and the Soviet Union from Afghanistan, respectively, the government of the time collapsed. Will that happen when or if the war in Ukraine ends? Obviously, no one knows. And yeah, he may be right there. And I think maybe that's one reason why Putin is not showing any signs of compromise. What's this here? Have these weird pop-ups coming. Succession can be existential in autocracies. No apparent successor to Putin has been identified. Khrushchev's replacements ultimately became a gerontocracy. Leonid Brezhnev lingered too long. Yuri Andropov and Konstantin Chernenko lasted barely a total of 2 years before dying. This prompted Mikhail Gorbachev's elevation. But then there was a Politburo with known members implementing policies, not so much today. China is more interesting, certainly across generations. It has endured revolutions and leadership changes. So again, he's pretty enamored with China, isn't he? Few earlier dynasties were as entrenched as today's Communist Party. Regime change often took time to develop, but consider some of the what ifs that challenge conventional wisdom about China's short term and long term future and the inherent difficulties of governing 1.4 billion souls. Well, okay, we're beginning to doubt that it's actually 1.4 billion, but anyway, okay, for the time being, for the sake of argument, of these 1.4 billion, estimates show hundreds of millions still live in poverty, mostly concentrated in rural and non-urban locales. Men outnumber women by a substantial number, even as the population declines. Many of the 16 to 24-year-old male cohort live at home and are not seeking work. China's real estate and property markets are unbalanced, with large numbers of buildings and home dwellings empty. Debt is huge. Although savings rates are high, China suffers deflationary pressures, and perhaps most significantly, its economy depends on future exports that have led to its economy depends on foreign exports that have led to a $1 trillion trade surplus, hurting its currency. Right. Um, Xi Jinping has decapitated the People's Liberation Army's senior leadership. Dozens of generals and admirals have been purged and arrested, including ministers of defense and the vice chair of the Central Military Commission. Why? Some argue that Xi is doing what Stalin did when he shot his top generals in the 1930s to stave off possible rivals. Right, there's a however there. If China is truly in decline, perhaps there are alternative explanations. Xi has reportedly set 2027 as the year in which the People's Liberation Army must be prepared to act against Taiwan, a charge that he denies. But we have many speeches of him saying that, though. Note that former U.S. Pacific Commander Admiral Phil Davidson has interpreted this as a window for invasion. But perhaps Xi set 2027 as an accounting date in which the Chinese army would be measured for its performance and not necessarily be ordered to invade. Maybe the firings were a signal of Xi's seriousness. Given the massive corruption that seems to have infected the senior ranks of the military leadership, Xi might be seeing the same incompetence and corruption that Gorbachev had once observed across Russian society. I don't think so. The corruption thing in a society like China is something that it's a label that can be pasted on just about anybody. And you're going to have to look pretty far and wide before you're going to find a person who really is going to be able to stand up to the scrutiny of corruption. And so clearly Xi Jinping is purging people for other reasons, but using corruption as an excuse. And what are those other reasons? I think it may be that he wants people in those positions. He wants to put new people in those positions who will follow his commands unquestioningly, because we're hearing that there's some reluctance within the Chinese military to stage an attack on Taiwan. And so if Xi wants to have an attack on Taiwan, then he needs people who are actually going to obey his commands when he gives the green light, when he says go. People need to go. He cannot have people who are going to say, well, wait a second, Mr. President or Mr. General Secretary, have you considered this? Have you considered that? No. He wants people who will go immediately without question. And I think that is what is, in my opinion, that's what's happening. Although, of course, I'm not a senior, Dubogrov, a columnist of UPI, but Dubogrov columnist. Okay, all right. Xi will not fall into Gorbachev's trap of applying openness and restructuring, which led to the Soviet Union's collapse. Well, obviously, yes. Instead, Xi is employing the old-fashioned method of putting in his team. We shall see if that works and whether China faces real decline. All right, so we will see. Okay. Ah, my goodness. What do these people get their PhDs for anyway? They don't know what's going on. Okay, anyway. All right, so that is that. And so let's go now to, let's go now to this one. Meanwhile, Taiwan, one of the ways that it's protecting itself is that it's becoming indispensable to the world, uh, including China, right? So they're saying, hey, you don't want to attack us because if you attack us, then you may destroy some of our uh, semiconductor plants, and you certainly don't want to do that, do you? So this is part of their defense strategy, and it's succeeding pretty much. In Taipei, real estate agent Jason Sung is betting that home prices around a high-tech industrial park in the northern part of Taiwan's capital will soon take flight because of computer chip maker NVIDIA. The area is where NVIDIA plans to build its new Taiwan headquarters as it rapidly expands on the island, set to surpass Apple to become the biggest customer of Taiwan semiconductor maker TSMC, the biggest contract manufacturer of the advanced chips needed for artificial intelligence. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang describes Taiwan as the center of the world's computer ecosystem. It's riding high on the global AI frenzy. Its economy grew at an 8.6 annual pace last year. That's, for a pretty advanced economy, 8.6% is pretty incredible. Usually you have 3, 4, 5%. People are satisfied with that, but 8.6 is dynamite. And it's hoping to maintain that momentum after it recently sealed a trade deal with U.S. President Donald Trump that cut U.S. tariffs on Taiwan to 15% from 20%. We have been lucky, said Wu Zongmin, an emeritus economic professor at National Taiwan University and a former board member of Taiwan's central bank. But Taiwan's heavy reliance on computer chip makers and other technology companies carries the growing risk of the AI craze turning out to be a bubble. And well, some people are talking about that, yes. What if the AI bubble is real? Kind of like, the internet. Remember the internet bubble? Many of you do, I'm sure. I can remember, when was that? I guess in the 90s, right? In the 90s, um, talking with people in the Washington Times newsroom about the internet, and people saying, hey, remember, all this hype about the internet, but no one has ever made any money off the internet. This was back in the 90s, of course. Not true today, obviously. But there was a sort of bubble period where there were so many companies being formed using the internet, and they didn't have any revenue, but they just sort of grew and grew and grew. And Amazon, of course, is probably one of the few that actually survived that bubble. And Yahoo, I guess, but Yahoo hasn't really survived in the way that Amazon has. I think Yahoo was bigger before the bubble than it is today. Because a lot of people were using Yahoo email back then, and I don't think that's a big thing anymore, is it? And also the Yahoo search engine. Yeah. Escalating tensions with Beijing, which claims independently govern Taiwan, has been another abiding threat, despite the island's vital role in global chip and AI supply chains. Right. Okay. An island of about 23 million people, Taiwan depends heavily on exports. They jumped to nearly 35% year on year in 2025 as shipments to the US surged 78% due to ballooning AI demand. That's thanks largely to TSMC, or Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, and electronics giant Foxconn, which makes AI servers for NVIDIA and is a major supplier to Apple. Taiwan has undergone massive economic changes while shifting from mainly labor-intensive industries such as plastics and textiles to advanced manufacturing like semiconductor fabrication. And as I've already shown you, Taiwan actually now has a higher per capita GDP than South Korea and higher per capita GDP than Japan. Japan, of course, is on its way down. But yeah, Taiwan is pretty incredible. It has really soared in the last few years. The AI frenzy has made TSMC one of the world's top 10 most valuable companies, right? So here risks persist of an AI bubble. I'm sure it does, yeah. But they call this the Silicon Shield against Beijing. This is what I was referring to. That they hope that Xi Jinping will think twice about ordering an invasion of Taiwan because uh, it will affect the Chinese economy as well. Okay? Uh, the risk of an invasion is unclear. Both global tech companies and Chinese industries would suffer from massive disruptions of the chip supply chain. Still, some companies have been identifying contingency scenarios in recent years on how to respond in case of military action by China. We need to understand the potential risk, potential damage to Taiwan. While many of its core research and development activities are in Taiwan, TSMC already has plants in China, Japan, and the US. So the Taiwanese company has plants in China and the US, and it's expanding its offshore production in the US, Germany, and Japan. So, businessmen like to hedge their risks, and so uh, this is natural for them to do. But it is interesting that whereas Taiwan is depending uh, on this silicon shield, the shield is actually has holes in it, right? See, roughly 65% of Foxconn's manufacturing is in China, and the company has factories in other parts of the world, such as India, Mexico, and the US. And AVC has been expanding its production capacity in Vietnam, right? So the AI boom has done wonders for Taiwan's stock exchange, where the benchmark index has climbed nearly 250% over the past decade, making many investors rich. But as is true elsewhere, the wealth is not evenly spread. Many Taiwan residents feel they have been left behind. Well, that's always true. Taiwan's wealth gap, according to official data, has roughly quadrupled over the past 3 decades. And the way you resolve a wealth gap is to deregulate, make it easier for people to start their own companies, but get rid of labor laws, make it easier to fire people. If you make it easier to fire people, then it's easier to hire people. Because with complicated labor laws, then whenever you hire someone, you have to consider, well, what happens if this guy doesn't work out? How are we going to get rid of him in that kind of situation? So people are reluctant to hire if the firing is difficult. So one way to close the wealth gap is to let people start their own companies easily, including the taxes, of course, reduce taxes and also make it easy to hire and fire. The pay of tech workers already earning high degrees, especially chip engineers and managers, has skyrocketed. For other traditional industries such as plastics and machine tool makers, growth has lagged. AI economists say the gap may widen as the AI frenzy continues. Okay. It can be tough to make a living, said Jean Lin, a 30-something manager of a takeaway outlet selling bento meals in a Taipei neighborhood where Foxconn's office is located. Many of the younger generation still can't afford to buy an apartment. Lin, who wishes to start her own business one day, added. A lot of people still feel they don't have much money. All right, so yes, that's always going to be true. There are always going to be winners and losers, and that's also going to be true in Cheongguk. But in Cheongguk, it will be easier for people to start businesses and to keep trying, and then if they fail, then there's a family safety net. The family is a safety net, and then they can sort of get some capital and start again somehow. Yeah. The best way to have the wealth gap narrow is to encourage small and medium-sized businesses. But the reality today is that large businesses lobby the government to create all sorts of regulations that make it difficult or impossible for small and medium-sized businesses to enter the market. And that is the problem that many countries are facing, including, I would say, the United States, or not so, less so the United States, perhaps. All right, let's okay, moving right along here. Um, let's take a look at this one here, IMF. The IMF takes unexpected stance on US dollar. Let's see what their unexpected stance is. Okay, bring it up. The International Monetary Fund just pumped the brakes on the recent wave of US dollar anxiety. So IMF is now, I guess they're supporting the dollar. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva on Monday, February 9th, warned markets to avoid overreacting on the back of the dollar's recent sluggishness, arguing that she doesn't foresee a global shakeup of its role anytime soon. Suddenly, whoa, you guys, wait. We don't want the dollar to go down quite yet. The reassurance comes at a unique point for the greenback. The US dollar index has fallen sharply compared to a year ago, and I've talked about this many times. On the day that President Trump was inaugurated last year, January 20th, the US dollar index was 108. And today it's about 96, I think. It's roughly 96. So where are we here? Okay. So it has come down about 12 points from 108 since President Trump was inaugurated. Where are we here? 96.9. Yeah, okay. 96.9. So, or let's say 97. So it's down 11 points. So it's down roughly 10% over the past year, which is a pretty big move. And it's a consistent move. It's a consistent move. And even though President Trump often likes to say, the dollar's strong, and it's the strongest it's ever been, a big, beautiful dollar. But obviously he wants a weak dollar. And I think he wants a weak dollar because as the dollar comes down, it has the same effect as putting a tariff on all imports. And if it comes down 10%, that means putting a 10% tariff. Same effect as a 10% tariff on imports. Here, most recently, there's a chatter that China's looking to trim its treasury exposure, stoking the dollar doomsday narrative. Well, we've talked about this, right? That actually the overall foreign holding of US dollar debt has gone up. Has gone up. US treasuries and so forth has gone up over the past year. According to figures released by the Treasury Department last November, I believe it was, right? So yes, China has come down a lot. China has reduced its holding of US debt almost by half over the past several years. But obviously others are taking up the slack, especially the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom now is in second place after Japan in terms of its holding of the amount of dollars that it is holding. So the UK is coming up, and I think others are also. And of course, stablecoin issuers are also, although not such a big factor yet, but I think Tether has about 60 billion now, and that's still about a tenth of China, but it's coming up. And I think the President Trump is counting on Tether and other stablecoin issuers to invest in U.S. debt. So all things considered, it's too hard to see why investors are asking whether something more structural is breaking behind. It isn't too hard to see why investors are asking whether something more structural is breaking behind the scenes. The sentiment aligns with Ernst & Young chief economist Gregory Daco's take, which I covered Dako warned that the strong U.S. economy story is far narrower than it appears. That's exactly the setup that feeds fresh worries about the U.S. dollar, with growth concentrated and fragile, leaving it vulnerable to a sudden shift in investor sentiment. That's exactly why legendary investors, we have a group of people who are referred to as legendary investors. Where's the legend? Okay. I, I, you know, are we talking about, are we talking about King Arthur here? What? Are we, are we talking about Robin Hood here? Well, where's the legend? They like to use that word legendary investor for some reason. I guess it's sort of a title that they bestow on certain people. Legendary investors such as Ray Dalio are calling for greater allocations to gold, a view he reinforced recently at Davos. Of course, these people, I don't know how they got so rich, because their public statements, actually, if you do exactly what they say in public, you're not going to become rich. In fact, they seem to be promoting stocks when they're selling, and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, maybe that's why he's legendary. Anyway, the IMF believes that the recent weakness cannot affect the US dollar's long-term dominance, deeply entrenched in capital markets, backed by unmatched liquidity and hefty supply of investable assets. Yes. And that is true. That is true. The U.S. so long-term dominance, deeply entrenched in capital markets, backed by unmatched liquidity. Unmatched liquidity means that there's just a whole lot of money sloshing around, right? And you don't have that anyplace else. You don't have that in China. You don't have that in Europe. And hefty supply of investable assets. Yes, you have stocks, you have bonds, you have real estate, you have all sorts of stuff that we don't even know about, right? Gold, you have all sorts of stuff. And this is the Georgieva. Yeah, okay. And clearly the near-term tape is essential. The near-term tape is essentially a sluggish dollar along with a stronger real asset setup. DXY is down over the past month. DXY, of course, is the index. It's the dollar index, and it's a basket of currencies that compares the dollar with the major trading partner currencies. While gold continues to rip higher, which usually happens when investors become cautious on the currency rates outlook. Stocks are moving in a positive direction, but nowhere close to matching the shiny yellow metals move in the same window. Well, but remember that gold was static for many, 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 many years. Yeah. Okay, this is what is this? It's just the DXY. Okay. And so IMF sees dollar weakness as a noise, not a turning point. In many ways, the IMF's sharp take has everything to do with defending the architecture behind the dollar. Georgieva feels the markets are essentially mistaking a cyclical move for a structural break. She warns investors against getting carried away by short-term variations of the exchange rate, even as the dollar index slides and posts its worst year-over-year declines. She argues that it is imperative for investors to effectively gauge the scale and plumbing. In her own words, she says that it's critical to look at the depth and liquidity of capital markets in the United States, the size of the economy, and the entrepreneurial spirit of the US. And also relative to other countries, there's a lot less regulation. So it's easier to start companies and so forth. You can have venture capital companies. Another point to consider is that a softer dollar might not actually be universally bad. Georgieva notes that the setup could perhaps be a major tailwind for emerging markets by efficiently lowering the cost of servicing dollar-linked debt. And that is true. That is true. A lot of countries have debt that is denominated in dollars. And if the price of the dollar is coming down, that means that it's easier for them to get a hold of the dollars that they need in order to repay that debt. That's exactly what BlackRock And Rick Reeder alluded to in a recent interview with Bloomberg. He said BlackRock had recently added to emerging markets, underscoring that the yield differential between emerging markets and U.S. high yields is as good as it ever has been. Okay. And so forth. And also, China's U.S. debt footprint isn't what it used to be. Exactly. I talked about this recently, right? So now, China used to have $1.3 trillion in 2013. Now they brought that down to 600 something, I think, or 800 something. Anyway, it's below UK. UK is now at 889, Japan 1.2. Okay. And what is China now? Did it say China? Did I miss it? Okay. No. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, China is now below the UK, which is 889 billion. Okay. Though some countries have trimmed, Brazil and India are lower year over year, the broader pattern looks mostly mixed at this point. Okay. All right. So yeah. So whatever the motivation, and I don't trust IMF, obviously, but whatever their motivation is, I think they are speaking the truth here in terms of the dollar. But what is their motivation? What is the IMF's biggest concern? Well, the biggest concern is that they're going to lose their jobs, that the IMF is going to become irrelevant. And how would that happen? Well, stable coins or perhaps Bitcoin. If it over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years develops, and if you're looking ahead 10, 20 years, then you could say that, yeah, if a country like El Salvador, for example, which is still, its Bitcoin holdings are still relatively small compared to its debt, and it's still dependent on the IMF right now. But if El Salvador is able to break free of the IMF as a result of Bitcoin, and suppose President Trump's intention to repay the US debt with Bitcoin succeeds, suppose that happens, then where's this lady going to be? She's going to be in the unemployment line, right? So that may be the IMF's motivation here, and this lady's motivation to say, well, yeah, hey, whoa, we're kind of dependent on the U.S. dollar here, and the architecture behind the whole U.S. dollar system, the current financial architecture of the world, right? So don't go killing the white horse of the apocalypse just yet. we still need to pay our kids Ivy League tuition, stuff like that. All right. It's a crazy world. But one rule of thumb: nothing is as it appears to be, and people never say what they are actually thinking. And so this is why I'm saying that the IMF must have some ulterior motive here to supporting the dollar. They're not trying to help. They're not trying to help people make money. They're not trying to narrow the wealth gap in the world. That is for sure. But they are concerned that all this whole de-dollarization sort of a political mood may go a little bit too far, right? And actually de-dollarize the world. That would be terrible in their view, because they need the dollar, and a lot of people need the dollar right now, including people who owe dollars and need to repay those dollars. So we'll see. All right, let's see. I think we have more stories than I have time for. Well, let's just do this one. It's a nice short one. This young lady in North Korea, Kim Jong-un or Kim Joo-il, the South Korean intelligence made a report to the South Korean legislature today saying that they think she is going to become the successor to Kim Jong-un I still am highly, highly, highly skeptical. I think she is kept beside him so that, when he reaches for the nuclear button, right? When he reaches for the nuclear button, she'll be there to say, "Oh, Daddy, please, no, don't. If you do that, then the Americans will wipe us off the map. Please, please don't push that button." I think that's, anyway, she's cute. She's, um, well, she's cute. Okay. She's, so what is she now? 12, 13, 14, something like that. And yeah, I think the people who are actually running North Korea sort of keep her there to uh, to keep Kim Jong Un happy. I think that's her role. And when he dies, I think her lifespan beyond that will be measured in probably hours. I think that is the tragedy, I think, of this young lady. I predict, yes. All right, gotta go. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.